This is Techzine Talks on Tour, the podcast about enterprise technology that brings you IT insights and analyses from events all around the globe. We cover everything, everywhere. Visit techzine.eu for more information, and don't forget to subscribe to this podcast.
Welcome to the new episode of Techzine Talks on Tour. I'm at the RSAC conference. You have to add the C nowadays. And I'm here with Jonathan Trull. You're the CISO at Qualys,
That's
if
right.
I'm not mistaken. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Nice of you to take the time. So what is it? Well, I know what a CISO does, but I mean, just for people listening that I think, well, what does a CISO at a security company do? So what is your job description in general?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I'm responsible for, and every CISO role is different, right? I mean, honestly. So I'm responsible for corporate security, product security. So obviously making sure that our product meets all of the highest standards of security that our customers would expect, and privacy and compliance. And then I think something that's a little bit unique is I also own the engineering component of what you would consider the traditional security components of the product. So identity access management, logging infrastructure, things that customers would expect, native built MFA, secure by design, the components that you would want to have in a product that you're
Now, when
using.
you say you own that, do you also get your hands dirty and actually work on the actual products, or?
Yes, yeah. That's part of it. Is have product managers that their focus is again on designing, and then an engineering group that then does the build components.
Oh, that could. I mean, that makes sense, because then you actually know what you're talking about, right?
I hope so.
No, no, but you're not you're not just an executive with who can manage stuff, but not in the trenches, basically. Right?
I tend to be more hands-on for sure. I mean, I think everyone approaches their role a little bit differently, but and then I think one of the other unique parts, is being in a security company, obviously we want to model using our own technology in the best, most mature way possible. So, we do a lot of just work to make sure that as we release new products, we onboard them, we, mature them, operationalize it so that we're, running them.
Do you speak to customers a lot as well?
Yeah, I do. Yeah. I talk to customers quite a bit, especially peers, CISO peers. And I do that as part of running our strategic advisory board.
Yeah.
So that's kind of a additional job that I get, which is kind of groups of customer CISOs that we talk to. What are their problems? What are they struggling to solve? What does that mean from a Qualys perspective? So that's another part of the job.
Looks like you have enough in your hands to fill your days and your weeks, right?
Yeah, keeps me busy. Keeps me busy.
So just walking around the conference here, what strikes you most when you look at? I mean, I don't know if you had the chance to actually go walk around the expo floor and talk to people and get the general gist of what we're doing here.
Yeah.
But what strikes you most?
Yeah, I think. Obviously AI, plays, I think last year it was pretty prominent, even more so. I think it's more prominent this year.
But it's completely different, right? Because I was here last year as well.
Yeah.
And then it was a lot about using AI in tooling to actually protect against attackers. And now it's shifted a lot to the agentic and to the other side of using AI in applications in your environments, right?
Yeah, very much so. Very agentic AI, embed it within all of your applications. I feel like there's a little bit more focus too in terms of people trying to understand how to help CISOs and security teams control the use of AI, use AI safely within like a business enterprise.
Do you think there's enough? I think there is, but do you think there's enough focus on running AI securely inside organizations? Because there's also this trend of using new technology as quickly as possible without really thinking about the ramifications on the security side. How do you see that in the market in general?
Yeah, I definitely don't think there's enough focus on that. Everyone tends to focus, I would say, more on like, okay, how do I prevent sensitive data going into SaaS, AI-enabled SaaS products, or kind of a DLP component. But the reality is, I don't think, RSA necessarily as a conference does a great job, in my opinion, of this anyway, is when you're actually building, like you're building your own LLM models and you're considering, how do I use it?
Yeah.
When do I do data masking to train the model? How do I incorporate all of that in the engineering life cycle? Unfortunately, I when I looked at like the sessions that are out there, and when I look at kind of the vendors, we cover a lot of that. It is missing because a lot of the work is around. Listen, how do you design it? And if you think about like a SaaS model, and this is part of my role in like product security, and obviously we're starting to use AI, but do you ship the data outside of a secure enclave into the model? Do you push the model into the secure enclave? But like, there's a lot of like decisions that have to be done.
You're adding a lot of new fundamentals to the entire equation, right?
Right.
So, and I always hear from the security industry and from others, customers as well, that getting the fundamentals right has always been a bit of a struggle,
yes,
to put it mildly.
Yeah.
And basic hygiene is still not there, and now we're actually adding more basic hygiene that we have to get right on top of it, and it really adds a lot of complexity. And I think there's not enough focus on that, at least from my perspective.
I 100% agree. I mean, in fact, I was talking to some other colleagues, like, do we need almost a new conference to a certain extent that is really focused just on like, how do we build and engineer smart security and like collaboration? Because again, we talk about the big, either really, really high level, like, okay, is AI safe or not? And I think like, I'm not interested in that conversation. What I'm interested in is, how do I make it safe in my product, and how do I make it safe for my company?
But then you see that, and that's not only the responsibility of security companies, right? So it's also the responsibility of the companies that come up with new technology. And for example, if you look at MCP, which is all the rage now, right?
Yeah.
Everybody has MCP servers, everybody does all that stuff. But MCP as a protocol, inherently, it's not secure.
Right.
Isn't it possible to make a protocol that's secure from the get-go? Or why do we have to continuously add security to stuff that's being recently built, right?
Right.
I don't understand that.
Yeah. I mean, I think, there's been attempts to discourage companies, right, from releasing protocols or whatever that are insecure. I think at the end of the day, probably the incentive to move fast and have feature rich versus the disincentive of like maybe designing it the right way just isn't there. And that is that's just my opinion at the macro level, right? I think, obviously don't want to get into politics or any of that, but, I think in the past there were some executive orders that were, at least thought by the previous administration, hey, what are we going to do? How do we incentivize building secure by design? But ideally, should the market do that? Does a free market economy kind of create that incentive?
That's sort of the open source approach, right? So if the community wants to make it secure, it will be secure. And then, at the end of the day, if you look at something like MCP, which is an Anthropic kind of thing, right? So if they think, look, we just build the basics. The people that actually are shipping it in their solutions, they need to make sure it's secure.
They're responsible for that.
They're responsible for that, and I think I get that. But why don't you just go the extra mile and say, look, we're gonna make this work from the get-go, right?
I mean, that's been the consistent story since the founding of the internet, right? Like, hey, the first protocols were like, well, okay, this is really cool. We can communicate across the world. Hey, what about security? Oh, then you layer on like a new layer in the network packet stack, and you add the security component. Unfortunately, it just seems like that's the trend, right? Is we tend to release these things and then say, hey, either security companies or the people using that protocol to build on it and have to add the layered security, and that is tough. It's tough on a CISO, right? Because then you're like, if you think about all the complexities in that, right? Then you have to say, well, listen, is that protocol being used? Who built on top of that? Okay, did they secure it? If they didn't, now what do I do? And kind of gets into third-party risk management too. Again, all this AI that's embedded in whatever, Gong or Salesforce or whatever ERP. It's great, but like that's a third party that built that, and you're trying to validate. Did they secure it? Did they build it properly?
And the lack of visibility into all of this is also quite astounding.
It gets much more difficult, and I think, even on that topic, there's been the work around, listen, we've had kind of SOC 2 reports for a long time, but they don't necessarily get to the technical depth. And we looked at like software bill of materials that you could, take from someone and really get it deeper, into the tech stack. But then I think, there's definitely some flaws there, and that one didn't take off, right? I mean, I think if you looked at, it was either the last RSA or the RSA before that, it's like software bill of materials was this big thing, right? It's like, oh man, it's going to revolutionize how we do third-party risk management. That's how these things go,
right? S-bombs were the bomb for a couple of years, and now I mean, and it's also a bit of a US kind of thing, right?
It is, it's a very. Yeah, and I think it was kind of
huge in the open source as well. I went to a couple of KubeCons. It was huge there as well. Everybody's talking about S-bombs. Okay.
It's a new big thing. Yeah. It's going to revolutionize third-party risk management, and now you don't hear about it a whole lot.
Even though it is very important. I mean, in Europe, where I'm from, you had all the new regulations, NIS2, DORA, all that stuff. Yeah. Especially DORA has lots of third-party kind of implications as well. So you need to make sure your third parties that you use are also compliant with DORA, so I would imagine that something like this would be very important.
Both I as a practitioner think it's very important. I mean, we as Qualys still think it's important, and especially when you look at like where we're going as just like a technology company, which aligns very much with me philosophically, which is, we were vulnerability management focused, and then I think vulnerability management is just, it's super important, but it's one risk component, right? Like there's a lot of other risks, misconfigurations, users that do stupid things, that's a risk, right? Like there's all these other components, and it doesn't make sense to look at it in isolation, because attackers don't look at it in isolation, right? They think if I can get to this identity, get the password, they didn't enforce MFA here, I can get, they think very network connected, and so, I think both my view and, us as a company is we're saying, well, let's expand how we think about a vulnerability, and exposure, let's start really looking at these pathways, and again, whether it's AI, flaws in AI, whether it's flaws in an API, a traditional API, whether it's flaws in a cloud instance, it doesn't matter. It's still a risk that has to be addressed.
But don't you think, to a certain extent, that looking at vulnerabilities alone, or attack paths, or whatever you want to call them, is at the end of the day sort of a fool's game, because there are so many that you lose sight of which ones are important and which ones aren't.
Yeah, it's a great point. I think also one of the things that we're really focused on is we as an industry haven't done a good job prioritizing what we focus on. And again, I think, listen, I've done the same thing. It used to be just an SLA game, right? We would say, well, if it's this level of vulnerability, they all have to be patched at this cadence. And it's impossible at a certain point, right? And so I think, we're providing a lot more mechanisms to say, well, that's not true, right? Like, it's not being exploited. There's not even a known exploit kit for that vulnerability. There's no activity that we see from a threat perspective. So why are you worried about it? Yeah. Like, why are we trying to deal with that right now?
I actually had a chat with a customer, or with a customer of, I don't know whose customer it was, but I had a chat with somebody this week. And he said, look, even though if you work in a company and you see a vulnerability, which has been ranked in whatever CVE, CFSS score, whatever ranking you use, you cannot unsee it, right?
It's true.
So as soon as you see it, you want to do something about it. And also, the second point is that you don't know, I mean, it may not be critical today, but it may very well be critical in a couple. So you can't just forget it,
right?
So you and as a practitioner, as a security practitioner, you want to solve it.
Yeah,
that's your job.
Yeah.
So it's very. I think it's inherently very hard for security teams and for people that actually decide which ones they go for, which ones they don't go. So to say, look, I'm just going to ignore this.
Well, and the way that we say it, and it's. We continuously track it and we continuously update the score. So that's something else that we've recently done. Because you're right. Like, listen, it's been proven that it can be exploit. There's a kit that's out. We see threat indicators that we know actors are using it. Score goes up. Listen, your priority has changed. I think the thing that we've seen that is different, like on the reactive side, we've always worked like that, in like a SOC or an IR team. We've always been like, okay, we have an incident, let's get on it, fix it. How important is it? Okay, let's escalate it, or decrease based on what we know. Where I think we haven't done that always good on the proactive side. It's always just been like, well, let's just treat it all the same. Let's try to get to it or not. And security people do have, and I understand why. I totally get it, right? It's that mindset sometimes that I'm going to eliminate all risk. Yeah. My job is to eliminate all risk. Yeah. And that is an impossible, like if that, and I used to have that mindset.
It's a good mindset to a certain extent because.
And it would drive me crazy. I'd be so stressed out, right? Because I'm like, my job as CISO is to eliminate all risk. But then when I looked at my other C-level peers, even though they have other risks they're dealing with, like financial misreporting or like lack of control and like procurement, they had a much more like rational way of viewing it. They're like, well, listen, there's some risk, we'll just tolerate it because it's not material to us. No. Where I feel like, in the security world, we've always just been this, oh my gosh, like, I'm holding the fort, I'm the person on the castle, and if one stone gets through, then I'm not doing my job. Yeah. And I think that contributes to a lot of the burnout in the industry, and a lot of the really stuff helps. And
you're fighting a losing battle anyway.
Right? You'll never win that battle if you're trying to remove all risk. And that gets us back to AI too, right? I think maybe I have too much of a rational perspective at times, but when I'm sitting down with teams and saying, hey, I have heard some security people say, I'm going to block all use, of AI in my environment. Yeah. And I'm like, have you talked to your CIO? Like, have you talked to your CEO? Because, they're finding some pretty significant, like, business value. Like, there's a reason it's so popular. Yeah. And even from us, right, when I look at, like, engineering capacity, is it bad to have AI write code for you? Yes or no, right? And I think
depends on the quality of the
code. Depends on the quality of the code and if there's bugs in it, right? Yeah. And if are you doing functional testing? But we still see like there's tremendous productivity gain. Tremendous. You still have to have security controls though, right? Like we still have to test the code. We still have to look for bugs in the code. Yeah. It's not like fully auto. It's, like we're not going to take that code and just push it.
I think it's the same with everything, right? So the truth is somewhere in the middle.
Right.
It's never blocking all. We do our own. We maintain and we build our own websites and all that stuff for our publications. And if you have to, a simple form, you're not going to type or code the entire form every time. Why would you do that?
Yeah, exactly.
It's the same form all over the place. So why would you?
Yeah. And there's nothing sensitive about it. There's no. Right. Yeah.
It makes no sense to not use AI to do that. Right. But the trick is to know when to use it, where to use it, and use it securely, and that's the big issue at the moment.
And then you get in, can you? And listen, we have completely a lot of focus on like governance, what I would call governance of AI, right? And so, and what control do I have over it, right? Like, you have.
I think that's a very hard point or a hard question to ask, especially with this moving target that AI is at the moment. Mm-hmm. It's very hard to definitively say, so this is my governance, I'm going to do this in that way, and I'm going to do it. Because you never know what it's going to be like in a couple of months' time, right? And so you need to be constantly moving along with that target as well. And it makes it quite complicated.
It does make it challenged because it is evolving so fast. And I think with AI too, you really have to get what is the use case? And I think most companies, and even products, you have to really know so what we're trying to solve from our product that we've developed is very much if you're developing internally with your own LLMs and AI, we need to help you develop it securely, right? But then you still have these other components, which are, do I allow users to use AI? If we find a lot of value, should we do an enterprise, like generative AI solution that gives us more control, that we can do blocking of proprietary data that maybe we don't want to go into that? Are they training their model on it and the legal, restrictions you can put in place?
You do need some central control over the adoption and the use of AI inside your organization, right?
Very much.
That's a no-brainer, I think.
Yeah.
But who's doing the control? Is that a? Are you going to get AI guardians or whatever you want to call them, or who's is that the security team, or is that somebody else who does it? Does it? Whose responsibility is that?
Yeah,
I think that's.
Yeah, I think obviously it depends on the organization, but I would say the security governance, the privacy governance, should fall on the security team, right? I mean, listen, your job is to digitally protect data, right? And there's data being used in these AI. So I think you have, and I think what I found too is, internally, if I didn't take that initiative, I'm not sure anyone else would, right? The CIO is like, well, listen, I'm figuring out how we can really use it and maximize productivity. That's their primary focus. It's really, I'm the only role that's like, okay, but how do we protect that data? How do we retain it? Can we delete it if we need to? I'm the one that's how do I do DORA compliance if we start to use this? Yeah. Like, what are the third-party regulations that we have to map into? So, yeah.
But if you're thinking about stuff like that and having it centrally, but also in a coherent kind of platform or whatever you want to call it, as a one big thing, makes a lot of sense, and not be too fragmented in how you want to secure or govern or whatever you want to call it AI in your organizations, right?
Yeah, and I think listen, young workers. I got 2 girls in college, and so I see what their friends do. Like, AI it's just going to be so expected in how they work. Like if we don't start to govern this, and as this workforce gets in there, it's just natural to them. It's embedded in Instagram. It's embedded in the apps that they're using. Actually, Instagram dates me, right? They're not using it fully now, but now they're Snapchat or whatever. Yeah, exactly. but when I see them, they're like, if they want to send a note to their friend, they take a picture of it and then say, hey AI, make this look pretty and add this and send it to so-ever, they don't even type anymore, right? And so they're expecting to work like that, and I think, we're seeing it as we're getting college graduates coming into the workforce. They're like, hey, where's my generative AI to help me do my job, right? I mean, so we have to, we have to govern it, and we have to do it so that they can start to use it and
how do you? So you mentioned the point. How do you do that inside Qualys? I mean, how do you enforce, or maybe the wrong word, but you know what I mean, right? How do you roll it out?
Yeah. It was actually so it was quite the journey, right? So I would say, we first started just by saying, like, are people really using it? And I think we're looking at network traffic, who's using what. You see, like, okay, people are using a lot of generative AI that they're obviously finding use for it. And then I think the next step that happened is every SaaS product, and we're a heavy consumer of SaaS products, right? We don't want to build our own stuff. We want to consume. If you have an ERP, great, we'll use it. And so suddenly they're all though like, hey, turn this switch and you can turn on the AI agent that helps you do whatever. So now suddenly it's exploding in SaaS. And so I think we got our arms around where is it showing up. And then we crafted a policy, right? Worked with legal counsel, CIO, and we said, okay, here's...
Do you see fundamental differences between the different types of AI that you use, for example, in SaaS, or as a sort of a big LLM that you address, or maybe on-prem? Do you see fundamental differences in how you should address these various types of AI use, or not?
You know what? I mean, not necessarily. I mean, I think... on all of them, at least as a commercial enterprise, you have what I would say you want contractual control usually. Like, I want the ability at an enterprise to say, I'm going to enforce my security terms. So what I don't want people doing is going to buy their own license for ChatGPT and using that. Because again, I have no control over it. You bought the license, your relationship is with them, it's not with Qualys, right? Yeah. So I need an enterprise level agreement. And the good news is with the SaaS companies, you usually have it, right? You have some existing, enterprise agreement. And so as they add that, you can start to embed it. Now, I will say the level of control that the vendors give you varies widely. Mm-hmm. And so, like, I'll give you examples. Yeah. Like, there are some cases where we'll say, like this is a great use case, but I want to be able to filter so that no customer data could ever wind up in your AI model. Do I have the ability to do the filtering? No, we haven't really thought about that. That hasn't been important to us. But then we have others that have released and they said, oh, absolutely, we've got complete filtering. You can write regex rules. It's all built in. And so you talk about secure by design. It's showing up in this AI world now, right?
And also, it's also the mindset of the company that is actually trying to sell you the SaaS platform, right? So if you look at, for example, the big CRM company from the Salesforce, they're focusing so heavily on, they're calling themselves Agentforce at the moment, so they're focusing so heavily on AI. They will, it makes sense for them to try and push as much AI toward the customers as possible, and maybe say, look, we didn't know, we're not, you can't have control over this because then this feature won't work anymore or whatever. I'm not sure if that's the case, but that is the mindset. That can be the mindset of companies trying to sell you SaaS solutions, right?
Absolutely. I think again, I think earlier as we were talking about what's the incentive to do things out of security, and listen, I think we as a security community that is in terms of like, I think there's some big things that we can always help influence. One of those is truly secure by design, right? And I think if you even look at the JPMC CISO wrote an article recently about putting
the Morgan Chase, the open letter he said.
Yeah, the open letter about SaaS. And listen, while AI wasn't necessarily the topic of that, it is that same thing, right? The more of this is getting delivered through SaaS, the more we as a community of security people have to say, here's our expectation of what would be in a feature that I would use, what kind of control I need, and if we don't do that, then they're going to deliver again things that are inadequate, and then we're lopping on products, right? Then I am looking for something on the floor here that theoretically plugs into all of that and does some type of DLP thing. But do I want to do that? Of course not. I don't want to do that. Like, I just want you to include that in your AI component, right? I want you to make that available for me. And it is making third-party risk management a more important area too. I would say, because now we are having to do a lot more due diligence, and saying, okay, you're adding this new AI thing. Let's talk about how you've architected that. Let's talk about, what are the data retention components around this? How do I know if there's an audit, that I have sufficient logs to determine what the AI did versus what a human did, and so now we're trying to work through just to figure out, like, again, what is our risk in this scenario?
And those are very interesting questions and good questions to ask as a customer. From your from the vendor, from the supplier, right? Because
absolutely,
at the end of the day, and I think it's also a lack of knowing what to ask, and on the customer side,
right?
Because that's one of my questions is always, what should customers ask you when they, not only about AI but about other stuff as well, right? What should the questions be that they should ask their third-party suppliers? And that should go beyond. Are you secure, right? Because
for sure,
nobody. You're not going to get a good answer to that question, right?
Right.
So, what are some of the questions customers could ask, especially then focusing on AI, from their SaaS vendors or other vendors that put AI in their hands?
I think some are truly kind of the table stakes, which is, do you use my data to train your model? Yes or no? That is super important, because obviously at that point potentially your data could leak out of that model, and listen, they're using your IP to enrich their IP, right? So there is, even from a legal, like, hey, monetization view, it's like, how are you doing that? And then I think you get into the components of really looking at the architecture of the AI, and again, this gets into asking questions about their SaaS model, right? Because there's listen, is all the customer data sitting in one database, and then you use code, or do you use encryption to segment tenants, or do you create, VPCs? And then the reason that's important is because then where does that model sit? Where does that LLM model? Because then are you sending data somewhere else? Is that model, like if you're an EU customer and you want your data to stay in the EU, well, what if that LLM model is running in an AWS tenant in the US? Well, now the data just left, right? And so I think you really have to understand kind of the pathway of the data, so you're meeting your compliance requirements. And then it's important to understand what controls do you have. Again, like if there are certain parts, if there are certain sensitive data that you would never want to go into an LLM model, especially into a third party, can you actually control that? If it's credit card numbers, if it's banking routing numbers, for us, there's certain customer data that we just say this is too sensitive. We would never ever have this in unencrypted format, number one, and we would never ship it anywhere else. So I've got to have a good sense that data can never get into this model that I would ever want it to be ingested or consumed there.
Maybe naively, I kind of hope that that's already the case, that you can actually indicate that some data should never leave. But I mean,
should be.
Maybe I'm a bit too optimistic about the world, but it is a very important thing to get right. Yeah.
Well, and data is I think the more I've been in this business, right? Data is there's so much wealth in data, and I think people, the more data knowledge you have in this world, in our day and age, the more powerful that is, right? So there's this natural. There's a natural tendency of people to want to add more power to that and to add more processing to that, and
that makes perfect sense, because at the end of the day, AI is not about models; it's about the data that you use, right?
That's right. Otherwise, can it do better reasoning than I can? I think I used to be a skeptic on it, but I do actually believe we are getting to an inflection point where, AI. And maybe it's because I'm getting older, and my mental capacity and jet lag, that plays a role, and these things aren't tired. They don't. I think they don't sleep.
I think it depends on what you expect from as an output, right? If you expect fresh, new perspectives on things,
sure.
I think you're going to be disappointed quite often.
Agree.
But if you expect sort of nice, good summaries or nice insights into some data, I think we're quite a long way away, a long way on the road to getting there. Yeah.
Agree. I think it's those use cases where you're saying, listen, here's a weighty, technically deep topic. Go look at all of these articles, consume it all. Give me bullet points so I can understand it as an executive. Like it's really good at that. Absolutely. Is it new content? Not necessarily.
And one of the things that I always try is to tell people, if they want to know whether something is good at this type of thing, is ask it to summarize a very long white paper or whatever. Yeah. And our perception and concept of summarizing is that you get the highlights, right? But for most models, summarizing is shortening.
Yeah.
So sometimes you may even miss very key components of the entire report, but it looks good.
Right.
But you still don't know. Right. So you still have to read the entire thing anyway.
Yeah. It's definitely like it feels very much like it gets it about 80% right on some of that stuff, and you're right. If there's a nugget in that 20%. Yeah, you can miss something.
And you can look like a fool if you.
Well, some of the stories there on improper citations and. Well, like I tell my security team or whoever, if we are using it in some capacity, it's like at the end of the day, you're the human responsible for this activity, right? So,
all right. Yeah. I think we're already over 30 minutes in.
Wow.
Time flies. Well, thank you. I think it was an interesting chat. I hope you got to say what you wanted to say, and if not, well, I'm sorry about that.
It was a good conversation.
Thanks for joining. I hope the listeners found it as insightful as I found it.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks so much for tuning in to this episode of Techzine Talks on Tour. If you're enjoying the show, please feel free to rate, subscribe, and leave a review wherever you listen to your podcasts. That helps others find the show. and we greatly appreciate it. If you'd like more information, please feel free to visit techzine.eu, where we cover everything, everywhere. Thanks again for listening, and we hope you'll join us again on the next episode of Techzine Talks on Tour.